Tonight, you'll step quietly into the straw-filled hush of a medieval peasant's winter and discover how surviving the cold was more about cunning, crumbs, and community than castles or kings. The first breath you take is smoky with peat. It's dark, the kind of dark that hums like wool pulled over your head, and cold in that slow, creeping way that feels like someone is tugging at your toes with icy fingers. You're inside a thatched cottage, crouched low, near a hearth that sputters with the last of last night's fire. You'll want to stay close. Firewood is precious, and mornings like this are not warm in any century. Above you, the ceiling is sooty with old seasons. You can trace the outline of a smoke hole if you squint, but it's mostly been patched up with straw and hope. The rafters creak gently, as if even the house is trying to stretch itself warm before facing another day. Outside, the wind presses against the timber walls like a bored guest waiting to be invited in. You, dear peasant, probably won't make it through this day. But before you freeze or faint from hunger or worse, boredom, go ahead and gently like this video. If you're still awake, drop a comment with your location and your local time. We're always amazed how many sleepy villagers we have around the world. Now let's ease into tonight's journey. You shuffle out of your sleeping area, which is generously called a bed but really is a pile of straw with a wool sheet on top and a sibling or goat underneath. The goat is warmer than the sibling, and frankly less likely to kick. This is winter in the 14th century, and you are nobody. A tenant, a laborer, a peasant soul with cracked hands and uneven socks, if you have socks at all. And today, like every day, begins not with purpose but with the sound of snoring. Because you don't sleep alone. No one in your village really does. Families pile together in the same room, sometimes the same bed, huddling for warmth like squirrels in a baked apple pie. Privacy is for nobles. Warmth is for animals. You are somewhere between the two. The fire is out. That's the first problem. You dig around the hearth and find a few glowing embers, which you coax back to life with a puff of breath and a very small prayer. If the embers were dead, you'd have to walk to a neighbor's house and ask for a burning twig. A walk through the snow, in the dark, wearing shoes made of stitched leather and luck. You hear a rooster in the distance. He's confused. Still dark. The room smells of onion and boiled cabbage, of hay and wool, of smoke and old wood. You sip something warm from a wooden cup. It's ale, thin and sour, but better than water. Peasants drink ale the way modern people drink bottled water. Constantly, automatically, and with few other options. Boiling water kills germs. Brewing ale kills most of them and gives you a buzz. Your stomach growls like a sermon. Breakfast is whatever's left from yesterday's stew. You peek into the pot and find something the color of despair, but it smells like garlic and hope. Here's a historical fact to chew on. Most medieval peasants didn't eat much meat in winter. The preserved meats were for special days, and fresh meat was for people who had cows or knew someone who did or had a bow or knew someone who wasn't looking. You, dear peasant, are eating turnips again. Still, you scoop out a spoonful, careful not to scrape the bottom. That layer is for someone braver or less picky. The door creaks open. A child enters, hair wild and cheeks pink from cold. She's wearing your spare tunic. You're not sure where your own went. This is fine. You hear church bells. No one is dead yet. It's just the morning call, drifting from the chapel down the hill, where the priest is probably also trying to find his socks. You step outside. The world is white. Not fresh, powdery white, but crusty, frozen, suspicious white. You hear the crunch of your feet. You feel the cold in your teeth. The village looks as if it has stopped breathing. That's how winter feels sometimes. Like the whole world is just holding its breath. You nod to your neighbor. He nods back. Words freeze faster than water today. You walk to the barn, which is less a structure and more a leaning suggestion of one. Inside, the cow exhales steam like a bored dragon. You whisper to it. You don't know why. The cow doesn't listen. But it's warmer in here, and the straw is dry. Weird tidbit. Some peasants, in desperation, would sleep in the barn with animals. Not as punishment, as strategy. Body heat is body heat. And a cow in winter is worth 5 blankets and a low-level friendship. You gather eggs if there are any. 1. Cold, lumpy, possibly frozen. Like your plans. You hear a baby crying in another cottage. You smell someone baking rye bread. You step in something that might be animal-related. You keep going. The tasks today are simple and endless. Feed the chickens. Patch the roof. Fix the fence. Fetch water. Try not to die. Scholars still debate whether medieval peasants were aware of how hard their lives were, or if they simply considered it all part of a divine joke they weren't supposed to laugh at. Either way, you're laughing now, quietly, into your scarf. The sun climbs reluctantly. It's not warm, but it's visible. Lunch is a crust of bread, dipped in whatever remains of breakfast. Someone offers you a bit of cheese. It's hard enough to be classified as weaponry. Still, you eat it like it's a feast. You watch smoke rise from chimneys. You wonder what those other peasants are eating. You imagine it's turnips. It's always turnips. The sky darkens by afternoon. Days are short. Firewood is shorter. You return to your cottage. You see your breath again. You feel it in your bones. Evening falls like a damp blanket. You and your family curl up on the straw. The fire crackles softly. Someone hums. The goat settles in, again choosing your feet as a pillow. And slowly, very slowly, you let the cold outside the door stay there. For one more night. The wind moans around your little cottage like an old man trying to remember the words to a song. You're half asleep, but not really sleeping. Just lying there in the dark, listening to the house creak and your stomach grumble. Morning hasn't arrived, but neither has sleep. Typical. Someone shifts beside you. Someone else snores. It's a soundscape of peasants. Coughs, murmurs, the occasional thump of someone rolling into a wall. You try to count your blessings. You get to 2. 1, the fire's still going. 2, the goat hasn't peed in the straw yet. Outside, the snow continues to fall, slowly burying the village in fluffy silence. You imagine it piling on rooftops, filling buckets, frosting windows like the world's laziest painter. You rise quietly, careful not to wake the small child sleeping across your legs like a blanket with elbows. The fire is low but alive. You feed it kindling. You feed yourself the last dried apple slice. tastes like winter. You pull on your outer tunic, still cold from yesterday, and step outside. The air bites your face, and your nose immediately regrets the decision. You wrap a wool scarf around your mouth and breathe through it. It smells like damp and dust and someone else's armpit. Comforting. The village is still. Snow crunches underfoot as you make your way to the well. The rope is stiff with frost. You haul up a bucket of water so cold it looks offended. You carry it back with frozen fingers. Halfway there, your neighbor calls out a greeting. Morning, you reply, or something like it. Your lips are too cold for consonants. You share the water with the family. Then it's chores again. And again. Nothing dramatic, just the same quiet rhythm. You fix the door latch. You mend a sock. You chase a chicken that got ideas. And all the while the cold is there. Not punishing exactly, just ever present. Like a dull companion with no sense of humor. Here's your major historical fact. In some parts of medieval Europe, communal baking ovens were used by entire villages. Families would prepare dough at home and carry it to a shared oven for baking. If your timing was off, you got ash. If you were late, you got bread with opinions. Today, you arrive just as someone else pulls their loaves from the heat. You bask in the warmth of the oven door. You pretend it's yours. You pretend you have another loaf waiting. Weird tidbit. It wasn't uncommon for people to use these ovens to warm their hands, clothes, or even their children's shoes. The oven doubled as a sort of neighborhood fireplace. You sit near the warm stone, letting your bones pretend they're in Italy. You hear gossip. Someone's pig is sick. Someone else is pregnant. Someone saw a wolf near the orchard. You nod, say little. You're mostly just here for the heat. Back home, you return to stitching. Patch here, a hole there. You're not a tailor, but you've learned. Dinner is bean porridge. It tastes like every other meal this week. Slightly smoky and somehow both too salty and not salty enough. But it's warm. That's what matters. As night falls, you see candles flicker in other windows. You see shapes move behind frosted glass. You imagine they're just like you, trying to get through another day, another night, another turn of the cold wheel. And again you curl up with your people, your fire, your goat, and you breathe, because you made it through. This morning again, though the sky doesn't look too convinced about it. Gray clouds stretch like worn wool across the horizon, and the light sneaks in the way someone might sneak a half loaf of bread. Slowly, guiltily, barely enough to notice. You wake to a cough. Not yours. Someone across the room. You hear them roll over, sigh, and mutter a prayer that may or may not involve the word turnip. You stretch. Something in your back pops like a poorly woven basket. You don't even bother to sit up at first, you just lie there, staring at the ceiling, listening to the whisper of wind between the thatch. Another day. Still alive. That's something. A thin sliver of light cuts across the wooden floor, highlighting a pair of shoes that may or may not be yours. It's hard to tell anymore. You all share everything. Blankets, spoons, socks, dreams. The goat is already awake. She's chewing something that looks suspiciously like a mitten. Outside, you can hear the village beginning to rustle. Creaking doors, footsteps, Someone coughing up what sounds like winter itself. You slip on your outer layer, thick wool, patched elbows, one button missing, and brace for the cold. Today's plan: survive. But before we get to that, let's take a moment to appreciate the low bar of medieval ambition. Because if you're hoping to finish the day with all your fingers and most of your dignity, congratulations. You're dreaming big. You step outside and immediately regret it. The wind hits your face like a frozen accusation. There's a small huddle near the well. A few neighbors whispering, hands tucked deep in sleeves. You wander over, drawn by the warmth of collective misery. Turns out someone saw tracks near the edge of the forest. Not human, not deer, something bigger. A wolf, maybe, or a bear. Or, if we're being honest, possibly just a large, grumpy dog. Still, the village takes it seriously. The cold brings hunger. Hunger brings boldness. And boldness is often a prelude to chaos. You nod gravely, as though you've ever successfully scared off a wolf. You haven't. You once scared off a chicken, and even then you weren't sure who won. The morning chores call. You fix a broken shutter. You dig a narrow trench to direct melting snow away from the cottage wall. Your fingers go numb 3 times before noon. Lunch is, surprise, turnip stew. But today someone threw in wild garlic. Fancy. You eat slowly, letting the heat seep into your bones. You don't talk much. No one does. The fire crackles in the corner. Someone hums a tune you don't recognize. And then work again. In the afternoon, the bailiff visits. He's here to collect rents. Always cheerful business that. You line up with the others, heads bowed, eyes low. He's wearing a cloak trimmed with something that used to be an animal. His boots don't leak. His nose doesn't drip. He smells faintly of dried herbs and smugness. You hand him a small bundle of dried beans and a folded scrap of cloth. It's not money, but it counts. Barter works when coin is rare and resentment is common. Historical fact. Most medieval peasants paid rents not in silver, but in goods, eggs, grain, cloth, or labor. You could literally pay your landlord by fixing his fence or giving him a chicken. Which, by the way, is still more useful than most landlords today. The bailiff nods and moves on. You breathe again. Later, you help your neighbor repair a fence. 2 of the boards are warped. 1 is missing entirely. The nails are reused, pulled from an old cart, bent straight with a stone, prayed over. You talk about the weather. You talk about the wolf. You talk about nothing, really. Just words to keep the silence from growing too large. Weird tidbit. Some villages believed that singing while doing outdoor repairs in winter would keep away bad spirits. So occasionally you'd hear a grown man warbling about fence posts like it was the latest chart topper. You try it. Your neighbor joins in. The fence stays broken, but the mood improves. By sunset, your hands are raw and your nose is red. But you've made it through another patch of hours. Evening brings a story. A traveler once told your family a tale about a woman who turned into a snow owl every winter to watch over her village. No one knows if it's true. But sometimes, when the wind howls just right, it sounds like wings. Tonight, the wind does just that. You wrap yourself tighter in your blanket. You thank the goat for being warm. You listen to the hush that settles like snow across the room. And slowly you drift. You wake to a strange sound. Not coughing. Not wind. Not the usual child stepping on your spleen type of sound. This is laughter. You blink at the ceiling, confused. Laughter is rare in winter. It's expensive. Costs energy, calories, trust. You sit up. Across the room, two children are giggling over something by the hearth. One holds a misshapen doll made from old rags and straw. The other is using a broken spoon as a voice for it. Sir Turniphead demands soup, the spoon says in a high-pitched voice. You smile in spite of yourself. The goat sighs heavily, clearly over it. The fire is still low, but there's enough heat to make the air bearable. Someone added more kindling during the night. You silently thank them. You stand. Your knees creak. Your back joins in. You're becoming an orchestra of minor complaints. Outside, the world is white again. It snowed through the night. The drifts are soft, unspoiled. It looks peaceful, clean, until you remember you have to walk through it. You layer up again. Outer tunic, belt, scarf, hood. You step out, and the cold hits you with less spite than usual. Maybe it's softening, or maybe you're just numb. Today's mission, salt. The path to the salt storehouse is half a mile away, down a narrow path that looks like it was designed by someone who hated feet. You carry a small satchel, some bread in your pocket, and one good mitten between both hands. The snow crunches. The sky hangs low. Birds will overhead, calling to each other like bored neighbors. You pass the bakery. The oven is quiet. You pass the church. A thin trail of smoke curls from its chimney. At the storehouse, you meet a man who smells like fish and speaks in riddles. He's in charge of the salt supply. You don't ask why. You simply offer him 2 eggs and a small prayer. He gives you a cloth-wrapped lump of salt and nods gravely, like you've just done a drug deal. For soup, here's your fact of the day. Salt was once so valuable it was used as currency. Roman soldiers were sometimes paid in salt, hence the word salary. In your village, salt keeps meat from rotting and makes bland stew slightly less bleak. You head back triumphant. You have salt. You have a story. The snow has picked up again. Fat flakes swirl lazily. Your footprints vanish behind you. You spot the tracks again, those big ones. Not the dog. Something heavier. You feel the hair on your arms lift. You don't say anything when you get home. Not yet. No need to start a panic. But you add more wood to the doorframe and move the goat a little closer to the fire. You share the salt. Dinner tastes marginally better. Still turnips, but now fancy turnips. Weird tidbit. In some regions, villagers would toss a pinch of salt into the fire while whispering blessings. It was thought to purify the home and keep spirits out. Or maybe it was just for fun. You do it tonight, just in case. Later, someone tells a tale about a man who married a frost spirit. She melted every spring, but always came back by first snow. The story ends with silence, like most stories do here. You fall asleep thinking about that spirit, wondering if she's watching through the cracks in your wall, wondering if she approves of your fire-building skills. The goat sneezes. You wrap yourself tighter. and winter continues without apology or pause. Morning comes slowly, as if it, too, is reluctant to be here. The sky is the color of watered-down porridge. A reluctant dawn filters through the crooked shutters, casting pale ribbons across your floorboards, if you can even call them that. They creak like old bones every time someone shifts their weight, including you. You sit up with a sigh that is more emotional than physical. The air is crisp, sharp, and not particularly interested in your comfort. But the goat is breathing evenly beside you, and someone has already stirred the fire. Not a bad start, relatively speaking. You pull on your outer layer, same one as yesterday and the day before. Wool, a bit stiff with age, and smelling faintly of smoke, sweat, and whatever herb someone tucked into the collar for protection. It hasn't worked so far, unless the herb was meant to protect against ambition. Outside, you hear someone yelling in the square. That's rarely a good sign. You poke your head out the door and immediately regret it. Not because of the cold, but because of the sight. It's the Baron's steward. Again. He stands in the center of the village in his soft, embroidered cloak, gesturing with the dramatic flair of someone who's never had to chop his own firewood. Beside him is a wagon laden with scrolls, parchment. What is this, taxation or bedtime stories? You step closer. The crowd murmurs. It's a census. Apparently, the Baron wants an updated count of livestock, laborers, and lodgers. He wants to know who's been born, who's died, and who might be hiding a pig under their floorboards. Because nothing says festive winter gathering like bureaucracy. Historical fact, medieval censuses like the Doomsday Book in England were taken not just to count people, but to assess taxes, duties, and obligations. It wasn't about knowing you, it was about knowing what you owed. You line up. Again. This winter has more lines than a modern passport office. When it's your turn, you state your name, your age, about 35, give or take a bad harvest, your occupation, turnip wrangler, and the number of animals you own, 1 goat, possibly pregnant. The steward records it all in careful script. He pauses only once, to raise a brow at the goat, who gives him a withering stare. Good goat. The census done, you return home with a sour taste in your mouth. Not from the steward, though that would be valid, but from the creeping realization that winter still has weeks left, and there's no escape except through it. You decide to do something useful, something practical, something that makes you feel like you're not just surviving, but coping. So you fix the broom. Yes, it's a humble task, but the broom is the quiet backbone of civilization. Without it, floors would grow moss, corners would become wildlife preserves, and dust bunnies would unionize. You tie new twigs into the old handle using a bit of hemp string and something that might be horsehair. It holds. You sweep the cottage with more pride than the act warrants. Your neighbor sees you and calls you over to help mend a pair of leather shoes. Is not yours. Yours are beyond saving, more concept than footwear. Weird tidbit. In some parts of medieval Europe, people would bury their worn-out shoes in walls or under thresholds, believing it would ward off evil spirits or bring good luck, which is either charming or the result of running out of places to throw garbage. You chat while you work. Nothing profound. Just the usual weather updates. Still cold. Livestock reports. Goat might be lying about pregnancy. And a bit of gossip. Did you hear the cooper's daughter is courting the beekeeper? You smile, even as your fingers go stiff from stitching. You head home with sore hands, half a crust of bread, and the distinct feeling of having participated in civilization, however loosely defined. That night, someone tells a story about a knight who wandered into a frozen forest and met a woman carved of ice. She offered him a wish. He asked for warmth. She melted. No moral, just melted. You lie down on your straw mattress, surrounded by the quiet shuffle of sleeping people, the crackle of the fire, and the occasional sneeze from the goat. And you sleep. The dream is strange. You're walking through snow, but it's warm. The sky is red like mulled wine, and the trees whisper secrets in a language you almost understand. Then you wake, because someone stepped on your foot. You groan. They mutter an apology. It's probably the child who insists on sleeping perpendicular to everyone else. You sit up, slowly. The fire has died down, but there's still a faint glow in the ashes. It's laundry day. Now, you may think laundry is a pleasant domestic task involving bubbles and warm fabric. In winter, think again. Laundry day means icy water, red hands, soap that smells like boiled ashes, and enough stiff fabric to build a decent wall. You walk to the stream, carrying the bundle of worn linen, underthings, and mystery rags that might be shirts or towels or just cloth. The stream isn't frozen, but it's trying. Thin sheets of ice edge the rocks like cracked glass. You kneel, dunk, scrub. Your fingers go numb in under a minute. By minute 3, you can't feel your wrists. You keep scrubbing. That's the rule. Don't stop moving, or you'll never start again. Historical fact. Most medieval laundry was done using wood ash lye and cold water. Clothes were beaten with paddles, then rinsed, wrung out, and hung to freeze dry. Warm water was rare, unless you were wealthy or exceptionally clever with fire. As you wring out the last tunic, your fingers give up entirely. You flex them, vaguely worried they'll snap off like icicles. Someone nearby hums a work song. Slow and rhythmic, the kind meant to trick the body into forgetting it's miserable. You join in weakly. Misery loves harmony. On the walk back, you see a fox watching from the tree line. His fur is thick. His gaze is judgmental. Back at the cottage, you string a rope across the hearth to hang the wet laundry. The smell of smoke and soap fills the room. Not bad. Not good. Just present. Weird tidbit. Some folks believed washing clothes during the wrong moon phase would anger household spirits. Others thought you could predict the future by how fast your clothes dried. Either way, you're not taking chances. You light a second candle just to be safe. Midday is spent patching clothes, carving new wooden spoons. You've lost 3 this week. And watching the snow build up against the outer wall. At this rate, the door will vanish by February. You eat lunch, barley porridge with a hint of something green. Could be parsley. Could be moss. Your cousin stops by to trade news. The mill's frozen again. The pigs broke out. And someone found strange footprints near the old burial stones. Large ones. Again. You nod and make the universal peasant noise for oh. Dinner is a community affair tonight. Everyone brings something. Stale bread, preserved apples, fermented cabbage. It's like a potluck, but the pot is mostly hope. You gather in the longhouse. Torches flicker. Shadows dance on the walls. Someone's playing a flute made from a sheep's bone. There's laughter. Real laughter. Someone tells a joke about a monk, a goose, and a misinterpreted prophecy. You laugh because everyone else is laughing, and because it's better than crying. You sit near the hearth, laundry finally dry, full for once, and surrounded by people who also woke up today, also survived, also scrubbed their fingers raw in a stream with a vengeance. And in that moment you feel it. Not happiness, not quite, but something like peace. You fall asleep beside the fire, head on folded arms, the sound of breath and flame mingling into one soft lullaby. You wake to candle smoke and the soft ache of a good sleep in a bad position. The longhouse is quiet now, only a few scattered snores and the low crack of a dying fire. You stretch slowly, like a reluctant cat, and rub your eyes with the sleeves of your tunic. Your breath still clouds in the air. It's not warm, but it's not sharp anymore either. That odd, in-between kind of cold, the kind that doesn't bite so much as settle in for a long visit. Someone's already stirred. You hear gentle rustling from the corner. It's the old widow, wrapping up the bones from last night's stew into a bit of cloth. She mutters something about broth and blessings and moves like someone used to mornings. You nod to her and slip outside. The snow is deeper today. It swallows your ankles, then your calves. You trudge along the narrow path already stamped by neighbors' feet, flanked by rising white walls. It's less of a trail now and more of a tunnel. Your destination, the communal latrine. Romantic? No. Necessary? Always. You don't linger. You return, quick and red-cheeked, and step over the threshold just as a child shrieks in laughter. Someone found an icicle. Someone else ate it. Chaos ensues. You spend the morning helping mend a section of collapsed fence. Cracked under the snow's weight. The sheep are currently standing just outside of it, debating whether escape is worth the effort. You drive the stakes deeper, your hands stiff and your nose leaking in that dignified way winter permits. One of the neighbors brings you a hot drink. Ale, slightly spiced, and warmer than your fingers. You drink it like medicine, which in a way it is. Historical fact. Spiced ale and warm wine were common winter comforts in medieval Europe. The spices were not just for taste, they were believed to warm the body from the inside, and some had mild antibacterial properties. Plus, it made people feel fancy. By midday, the clouds thicken again. Snow's coming. Again. You can smell it. You head inside, fetching more firewood, this time from the neighbor who hoards it with a paranoia that borders on religious. You trade a bundle of kindling for 2 lengths of string and a button carved from bone. Deals are weird here. You return just as a traveler arrives. He's tall, cloaked, and dripping like a ghost returning from a storm. No one knows him. No one wants to say the word outlaw, but it hangs in the air like chimney smoke. He offers a story in exchange for shelter. Of course he does. And like fools with nothing better to do than not freeze, you listen. He speaks of a village to the north where the snow never melts, of a well that sings when no one is near it, of a man who once traded his shadow for warmth and now walks the earth empty. You all pretend you're not captivated. Weird tidbit. Some medieval communities believed that certain travelers, especially those arriving in winter, might be spirits, witches, or divine messengers in disguise. Hospitality was often extended, just in case they were testing you. When the tale ends, the room is silent. You offer him your crust of bread. Someone else offers him a place near the fire. And just like that, he becomes part of your day. Night falls early. It always does now. The candlelight glows against the thatched ceiling. Shadows flicker like moths. You settle into your corner, wrapped in your blanket, head on your folded cloak. Sleep drips over you slowly, like honey down a warm spoon, and you let it. You dream of wind, not stormy wind, not cruel, just constant, moving through trees, over hills, around corners. You hear it whisper names, perhaps yours. You wake to find the wind is real. Outside, it howls like a thing with purpose. The snow has drifted against the door. It takes effort just to push it open. The world is blank again, white upon white, roofs barely visible, paths gone. A new layer of silence pressed down on the old one. You shovel your way to the well, breath fogging in front of your face, every step crunching like a snapped oath. Today is a stay indoors and stir the pot kind of day. You begin with broth. It's mostly water, some bones, 2 wilted onions, and an herb no one's sure about. Smells good, though. Smells like hope pretending to be soup. You stir it slowly, watching the steam spiral upward like it has secrets. Historical fact: pottage was a staple in medieval peasant diets. A thick stew made from whatever was on hand. It simmered all day, and ingredients changed depending on availability. Some versions could last for days with new bits added daily. You spend the morning darning socks. Socks that are more whole than sock, honestly, and rewrapping your feet in strips of wool just in case. A child recites riddles nearby. None of them make sense, but everyone pretends they're brilliant. What walks on 4 legs at dawn, none at noon, and turns into soup by twilight? The answer, apparently, is the chicken. You let the riddle pass. You've heard worse. Your cousin comes by to borrow thread and news. You give her both. She says her roof is leaking again. You say yours is mostly dry. You both laugh because even mostly dry sounds rich. A sudden gust shakes the wall. Snow sifts through a crack in the beams. You plug it with an old rag. Dignity is optional in winter. You wonder if spring remembers you exist. Weird tidbit. Some villagers believed that speaking the word spring during winter could anger the cold spirits and delay the thaw. It's not superstition if the snow seems to agree. You stoke the fire again, grateful for the crackling sound, the warm scent, the illusion of control. A neighbor shares news. A wolf was seen near the livestock pen. You nod solemnly. You already reinforced the gate, but you check again anyway. You pretend not to be scared. You hum as you work. Just a little tune. Something your grandmother used to sing about geese and luck and marrying someone with both eyebrows. Later, Someone finds a broken sled near the edge of the woods. No tracks, no sign of who used it, just the sled, tipped over like a forgotten toy. The traveler, still here, says nothing, but he watches the tree lean for a long time. Dinner is quiet. No stories tonight, just chewing and steam and the occasional polite cough. The fire is the loudest thing in the room. Pops once. Loud enough to make someone jump. You all laugh nervously. The wind calms sometime past midnight. You lie on your side, eyes on the shadows dancing across the low ceiling. You think of warm earth, green leaves, the sound of water that isn't frozen. You sleep with one hand curled beneath your chin, like a child, like a cat, like someone who needs to remember what soft feels like. And again you sleep. You wake slowly, like a kettle left on simmer. No alarm, no rooster, no bells. Just the gentle shuffle of bodies and the rich, smoky breath of morning stew wafting toward your corner. There's a soft hum in the air today. Not noise exactly, more like the low pulse of people existing near each other, stretching, stirring, stepping carefully over sleeping limbs. Someone sneezes. Someone groans. Someone curses a hole in their sock and then apologizes to it. Your body aches in familiar places. The straw under your cloak is uneven again. You make a mental note to fluff it later, knowing full well you won't. The fire was generous last night. The room isn't quite warm, but it isn't cruel either. You dress slowly, layers over layers, threadbare but determined, and rub your arms like you're trying to convince your blood to do its job. Outside, the snow glows blue. So still you can hear the individual flakes land, like quiet punctuation. You walk to the well again, bucket in hand, careful not to slip on the hardened steps. Your breath follows you like a ghost. This is how you measure time now. Trips to the well, the fire's rhythm, meals made from almost nothing. Historical fact: in many medieval villages, access to a well was a shared responsibility, and maintaining it during harsh winters was essential. If the bucket's rope snapped, it could take hours to retrieve it, so people often treated the well like a fragile family member. Today, the bucket behaves. You lower it, feel the rope strain, hear the splash, wait for the tug. Tiny victory. You return with the water, fingers red and stinging, and set it by the hearth. Your hands hover over the flames. The skin tightens, then sighs. The child with the riddles is back. Today's question: what has no fur, no teeth, but bites harder than a bear? The answer is February. Everyone groans, including the fire. You nod toward the traveler, still nestled in the corner. He hasn't left, doesn't speak unless prompted. But today you catch him watching the snow like it's whispering to him. "Storm's not done," he says. You nod. No one argues. You spend the afternoon boiling lye soap. The smell is assertive, like punishment with undertones of goat. A neighbor helps. Together you scrub the linens, cold water, raw hands, stiff cloth. You laugh at your own red fingers. Fashionable, someone says. The frostbite look is in. Weird tidbit. In some medieval households, soap wasn't common. People used ashes mixed with animal fat, or even crushed herbs. sand, or old urine, yes, really, to clean clothes and skin. Hygiene was innovative. Back inside, you sew a patch onto your tunic, your fifth, maybe sixth. The fabric no longer matches, but it holds. That's what matters. Evening arrives with a sigh. The wind picks up again. The fire protests. The walls whisper like old bones. Someone plays a tune on a one-string fiddle. Soft key, but no one minds. The melody feels ancient, half-remembered, like something your grandmother might hum when no one's listening. Sleep waits for you just beyond the flames. And once again, you let it take you. You dream of green, the kind of green that smells like wet leaves and mossy stones and earth so soft it drinks the rain like wine. You walk barefoot in the dream, and for a moment you forget winter. But then you wake, and remember, cold again, but not cruel, more like a persistent neighbor who never leaves. You dress in the dark, fingers fumbling, breath visible. Your boots are stiff. You consider arguing with them, but decide instead to just mutter and stomp. The sun is trying. You see it through the window, a pale disk, more suggestion than light, barely illuminating the frost-webbed glass. Today, you're helping repair the thatch roof. Your reward for being slightly taller than the others. You scale the rickety ladder, every rung a creaking gamble. At the top, the wind greets you with a slap. From here, the village looks like a scattering of loaves under powdered sugar. Quiet, stoic, half asleep. You press down new straw, careful to weave it tight. Your fingers go numb by the second bundle. Your nose drips defiantly. Somewhere below, someone sneezes loud enough to startle a goat. Historical fact: thatch roofing, made from straw or reeds, was a common and surprisingly efficient method of insulation. Properly thatched roofs could last decades, though they needed patching often, especially after heavy snow or storms. A chicken wanders into the path below. It's the bold one, always escaping. You call down a warning. No one catches it. The chicken lives another free-spirited day. By mid-morning, your shoulders ache. You descend the ladder with dignity barely intact. You're rewarded with hot porridge and a sliver of honeycomb. Rare, golden, sweet enough to make you weep if you had any energy left for that sort of thing. Someone reads aloud from a borrowed prayer book. No one really listens, but the rhythm is comforting, like rain on the roof or your own heartbeat in quiet moments. Weird tidbit: many medieval villagers were illiterate, but they still enjoyed being read to, especially during winter months. Religious texts, saints' lives, and moral tales were often passed around like prized treasures, not necessarily for learning, but for lulling. Afternoon drags its feet. You fix a buckle on your belt, carve a new spoon from a bit of driftwood, and spend an hour rearranging firewood like it's a puzzle with no solution. Your cousin stops by again. This time, she brings a bit of old cheese and a riddle. What's colder than the snow, louder than the wind, and impossible to escape? The answer, clearly, is your in-laws. Everyone laughs a little too hard. Evening comes on quietly. You sit by the fire with your feet tucked under you, nursing a cup of something warm and questionable. Maybe broth, maybe wine, maybe a little of both. You watch the flames dance. You feel the day settle in your bones. You hear the distant hoot of an owl. The traveler finally speaks again. This time, a story about a king who slept through 100 winters. Everyone listens like it's truth. You rest your head against the wall. Let the words wrap around you like an extra blanket. And just like that, sleep finds you again. You wake to the familiar sound of creaking beams and low murmurs. Voices layered like old wood. Tired, warm, a little raspy from the cold. Someone's poking at the ashes with a stick that looks suspiciously like a broken broom handle. The fire huffs like it's annoyed to be awake too. The smell of turnips and cabbage, boiled beyond belief, drifts through the room. Someone adds a pinch of salt with the gravitas of a royal chef. You watch them stir, solemn and proud, even though it's clear the stew will taste like damp history. You wrap your cloak tighter and move slowly, as if your limbs forgot how to be limbs overnight. Outside, the air bites again. Not hard, just enough to remind you who's in charge. You trudge down the lane, your boots crunching over the same path you've taken 100 times. It's so familiar it could walk itself. You pass the fence that never stands straight, the rock shaped like a goat's head, the old man who sits in the doorway and spits like it's a competition with the frost. Today is market day. Not the fun kind of market. There are no roasted nuts, no musicians, no vendors yelling about exotic spices. Just wool, potatoes, maybe a pig. Historical fact. In smaller medieval villages, markets were often hyperlocal affairs. Just a few stalls or blankets laid on the ground, with neighbors bartering more than buying. Currency was helpful, but gossip was the real coin. You see the woman with the loud laugh trying to swap onions for a cracked comb. You overhear someone arguing about the fairness of trading 3 eggs for a spoon. No one ever seems to win, but everyone keeps trying. You trade a carved bead for a pair of thick socks. Feels like a fair deal. The socks are mismatched, slightly damp, and handmade with love or something resembling it. You tuck them into your coat like treasure. The wind shifts. You smell something rich and warm. Someone's roasting chestnuts nearby. You drift toward it like a moth. Weird tidbit. Some peasants believed the smoke from burnt chestnut skins could ward off toothaches and bad spirits, which means someone, somewhere, intentionally lit snacks on fire on purpose. You share a chestnut with the traveler, who now stands beside you like he's always been there. You think it'll snow again? He asks. You shrug. It never stopped. He laughs once, quietly, like maybe he's starting to like this place. The afternoon turns silver. The sun doesn't so much set as give up and hide. Back home, you wash your hands in a wooden basin, fingers stiff from the wind. The water smells like iron and old pine. Dinner is stew again. It always is. But this time, someone found a bit of dried mushroom to throw in, and it transforms the meal into something bordering on flavorful. You nod with gratitude. By the fire, stories begin again. The girl with the riddle sings a lullaby this time. It's haunting, about a ghost who freezes everyone she kisses. Comforting stuff. You lie back, pull your cloak over your chin, and let the heat from the hearth anchor you. One more night survived, and that's more than enough. Morning finds you half awake, half frozen, and half curious about how people in warmer places live. probably with fruit and sandals and noses that aren't always red. But here you are, in a cottage that smells like wood smoke, old wool, and leftover dreams. You stretch. Every joint protests. Your spine sounds like a medieval drawbridge. Outside, the world has turned into a painting. Soft hills blanketed in snow. Trees stiff and noble. A few smoke trails curling from rooftops like sleepy ribbons. You decide to check on the goats. Yes, those goats. The ones who stare at you like they've seen you do something embarrassing and plan to tell the whole barn. You clomp through the snow in borrowed boots, 2 sizes too large but warm and forgiving. The goat pen is half buried. You shovel a little path using what might be a flattened bucket. The goats are fine, condescending as ever, but fine. One sneezes directly on your arm. You thank him sarcastically and refill their troughs. Historical fact: goats were invaluable to medieval peasants, offering milk, meat, hides, and sometimes companionship. They were hardy, weather-resistant, and had the uncanny ability to escape even the best-built pens. A peasant without goats wasn't poor, exactly, but definitely at a social disadvantage. It was goat or bust. You repair a loose latch on the fence using twine and luck, then trudge back through the snow. Your reward is bread, stiff, dark, and slightly older than it should be, but toasted near the fire with a sliver of garlic fat. Heavenly. You help mend a broken bench by the hearth. The leg doesn't match anymore, but it holds weight, and you call that a victory. In the corner, someone's playing with a spinning top. You didn't even know anyone still had toys like that. Weird tidbit. Some medieval toys weren't really toys at all, but objects repurposed for amusement. Stones painted like birds, dried pig bladders used as balls, and yes, spinning tops carved from leftover wood. Simple pleasures, and often louder than expected. The afternoon brings news. A rider passed through town, a real one, on horseback, with boots that didn't leak and a scroll sealed with wax. You hear whispers. Taxes might change. A lord may visit. A nearby village lost 3 oxen to wolves. Everyone nods like this matters, like it changes anything about today. It doesn't. You sweep the floor. A quiet protest against the universe. You rinse a cloak in snowmelt and hang it near the fire. You help the old man find his hat, again. It was on his head the whole time. Evening comes with a little rain mixed into the snow, making it slushy and mean. Inside, the fire crackles with more personality than some of your neighbors. You sit close, toes spread toward the warmth, fingers wrapped around a cup of something vaguely medicinal. The traveler reads from an old tale. Something about a knight who falls asleep in a cave and wakes up 100 years later with nothing but a beard and a very awkward sense of fashion. The girl with the riddles offers a final one. What freezes your lips, steals your socks, and makes your nose drip like a leaking bucket? The answer is, of course, January. You smile. The room quiets. The wind sings. And your body, worn but full, leans into rest again. You wake to a kind of silence that doesn't trust you. It's too quiet. No goat bleating. No pot clanging. Even the wind sounds like it's holding its breath. You sit up slowly, cloak tangled around your knees. Someone left the door slightly ajar overnight, and a thin ribbon of cold has crept across the floor like a lazy ghost. You close it with a soft click, then watch your breath rise like a puff of chalk dust in the morning light. Someone finally moves near the hearth. A grunt, a shuffle, the unmistakable clink of spoon against empty bowl. It's ration day, which is less festive than it sounds. You and the others huddle near the central table, where a modest pile of supplies sits like it's on trial. One person tallies with a stick in the ashes. Another measures out flour with solemn pinches, like it's gold dust. There's talk of cutting the bread thinner, stretching the broth, maybe skipping a meal every third day. You nod along, even as your stomach stages a polite protest. Historical fact. In the colder months, rationing was essential for survival. Without preserved goods, drying cellars, and salted meats, families often had to portion food with incredible precision, sometimes down to the crumb. The term famine food existed long before any real famine struck. It meant bark, moss, or anything edible if you really tried hard enough. You're given your share, a thin slice of hard cheese and a heel of bread that would make a decent weapon if needed. You eat slowly, like someone trying to remember what chewing feels like. The traveler offers you a sliver of dried apple. You thank him as though he's gifted you the moon. The day continues. You chop wood in the outer yard with a hatchet that's more rust than blade. Your hands burn from the cold, then go pleasantly numb. You think this might be what resilience feels like. A boy asks you to help fix a hole in the thatch roof. You climb a creaky ladder and spend 2 hours arguing with straw. It wins. Weird cultural tidbit. In some villages, bits of hair, broken tools, or symbolic trinkets were woven into roofs for good luck. The idea was that spirits disliked clutter and would leave homes alone if the thatch was already claimed. A medieval version of occupied, do not disturb. You come down smelling like hay, dust, and impending back pain. Later, someone suggests a game, a sort of guessing match involving gestures and shadow puppets. The winner receives the last roasted chestnut, which you suspect is just a pebble in disguise. The room glows gently with candlelight. A dog snores in the corner, dreaming of things it's probably not allowed to chase. The traveler falls asleep mid-sentence. You don't mind. You stay awake just a little longer, watching the way the candle flickers against the old stone wall. It's not much, but it's something. Snow again, this time with a bitter edge, like the sky woke up on the wrong side of the atmosphere. You wrap a scarf twice around your neck, pull your hood low, and prepare to endure. You're headed toward the far hill, the one with the view. Someone mentioned a tree had fallen there, blocking the trail used by the merchant with the mysterious boots. There's a reward for clearing it. A pair of gloves that don't leak and a promise of smoked fish. You're in. The path is steep and stubborn. You pass the frozen brook, now nothing but a hard shimmer of glass and forgotten frogs. You step over half-buried stones, each one shaped suspiciously like a sleeping animal. You tell yourself they're just rocks. The tree is massive, ancient. It didn't fall so much as crumble, its insides hollowed out by time or beetles or both. You set to work with a borrowed saw and more enthusiasm than skill. Takes most of the morning and 3 breaks, but you manage. The merchant appears out of the woods like some half-mythical figure, wearing those suspiciously dry boots and carrying a package wrapped in waxed cloth. He nods once, hands you the gloves, and vanishes back into the snow like he was never real. The fish arrives hours later, delivered by a boy who doesn't speak, only points to the bundle and runs. You roast it by the hearth that evening. The smell draws every soul in the cottage. You share it, of course. Even the dog gets a nibble. Historical fact, trade networks, even informal ones, were vital during medieval winters. Bartering for necessities or transporting goods across nearby settlements meant survival. There were no Amazon carts, no tracking numbers, just trust, rumor, and the occasional fast-moving kid with a bundle under his arm. You settle back with a full belly and a pleasant soreness in your legs. The girl with the riddles has nothing new tonight. Instead, she offers a tale about a cursed pot that refilled itself, but only with turnip stew. A blessing and a nightmare. Weird tidbit. In some northern villages, enchanted cookware featured heavily in winter folk tales. Bottomless pots, ever-burning lamps, talking loaves of bread. The cold made people dream strange comforts. The room is quieter tonight. Even the wind has calmed. The traveler shows you a map he's been sketching. Tiny, imprecise, full of animals that don't exist. It's perfect. You tell him about the goat who sneezed on you. He claims it's a sign of good luck in some regions. You doubt him. Sleep comes without much resistance. You curl close to the fire, gloves tucked into your pocket like medals. Another day, hard but whole. You've almost made it. The final stretch. You feel it in your bones the moment you wake, slightly less sore, slightly more Andyish. Today is for gathering. Not wood, not herbs, but memories, maybe. You tie your shoes with a double knot, as if bracing for something ceremonial. The snow has settled into its final pose, blanketing the world in quiet applause. Out in the yard, the rooster announces nothing in particular. You help the old woman stir the morning pot. Today it's oats and boiled pears, a celebratory feast by winter standards. She smiles at you as if to say, "Look what we made it through." Historical fact. By late winter, most medieval peasants were nearing the bottom of their stores. Survival wasn't about heroics. It was about planning, sharing, and sheer routine. Celebrating small victories like a full pot of oats wasn't sentiment. It was strategy. You eat slowly. Tastes like relief. After breakfast, someone calls for a walk. Not for a chore. Just to breathe. You bundle up again, third scarf, second cloak, mittens you found under the dog. The path leads toward the chapel ruins, half sunk in snowdrifts. You pass a row of trees coated in frost, each branch delicate as blown glass. Inside the old chapel walls, nothing stirs. Moss grows in the mortar. A crow mutters something unintelligible from the eaves. You sit for a while on a broken bench. Let your mind go fuzzy around the edges. The girl with the riddles joins you, says nothing, just sits. The silence between you is kind. Weird cultural tidbit. In some rural villages, people believed sitting in abandoned places helped reset one's spirit, like airing out a house. It wasn't exactly religious, but it felt sacred all the same. You pick up a stone and toss it gently into a snowbank. The sound is satisfying thup. Later, back at the cottage, there's talk of spring. Someone mentions seeds. Another recalls the sound of frogs returning. Someone else dreams aloud about strawberries. Everyone sighs as though they've just seen one. You warm your gloves by the fire, now cracked and familiar. The traveler says he's leaving tomorrow. He's got another map to draw, another stranger to confuse, another village to disappear into. You don't say much, just nod. Maybe he'll be back, maybe not. Historians still debate whether those kinds of travelers ever really stayed anywhere. Some say they were wanderers by nature. Others believe they just enjoyed a good exit. You step outside one last time before bed. The snow has stopped. The moon hangs like a cold coin in a soft, blue-black sky. You see your own footprints from earlier, still there, still clear. Proof you made it this far. Wind down. Now breathe out. The cold has softened. The fire has lowered to a lazy glow. You can still hear the faint crackle of wood, the slow sigh of the walls warming in the hearth's light. The cottage is quiet again. No chores left. No visitors. Just the slow, steady hush of sleep arriving on slippered feet. You curl deeper into the blankets, the straw mattress molding gently around you like an old friend. Your hands are warm. Your belly is full. The dog by the door grumbles contentedly in its dreams. Outside, the snow has stopped falling. Even the wind, which once roamed freely through cracks in the walls, has curled itself into a soft silence. You've walked frozen paths, carried buckets of ice, slept beside strangers who became almost family. You've fixed leaking roofs, shared ghost stories, earned mittens, and survived the slow passage of winter's hardest days. You've made it, and now the story rests. The embers flicker low. Your eyes begin to close. The past, for all its hardship, was never in a hurry. And neither are you. Sleep well, traveler. You're home now.